forth between different units of measurement. Because if you're, I mean, especially if you're working on something for print, and if you're measuring, if you're working in inches, you know, that's great. But there are a lot of functions that are much easier to apply if we're thinking about points. It's just that the increments that we use are simpler whenever we look at points, pixels, that kind of thing. So if I deselect everything on my canvas and I come over here to my properties panel, and I'm using the Essentials Classic workspace, by the way. We've got our units over here. And right now I'm set to inches. I can switch those to anything else I need to at any point. And, you know, points, pixels, and picas, you know, there's 12 points in a pica. Pixels, you know, we know what those are. Then we've also got, we can change our measurements to feet, inches, yards, etc. If we're doing something that's going to be a relatively large graphic, we might want to use feet and inches, maybe. I usually just do the math. Oh, which is another thing, which I'll show you. I usually just do the math there, but, you know, it's frequently useful to switch between inches and other units of measurement. So, and here's a perfect example. I'm working in inches, and generally speaking, I want to work that way, all right? But, and I'm going to go to outline mode here. So the first function that we're going to look at real quick under path, with that object selected, is offset path. And offset path is really nice because if you've got a shape on your canvas that you need to enlarge or reduce for one reason or another, and I'll give you an example here in a minute, it does a really nice job of creating a very even expansion, either outside or inside. So, and I'm doing this in inches right now, but what if that's too wide and I want something really narrow? Well, now I'm just kind of hunting around for measurements that might work, you know? No, that's not it, you know? So this is kind of one of those cases where having a different unit of measure to work with would probably be pretty helpful, you know? So I'll just cancel, and I'm just going to click out here to deselect, go to over to my properties panel, and switch from inches to, I'll go to points. Points and pixels are roughly the same, but points work. And then I'll just select this again, go back to my object menu, to path, outline, or offset path, and now I've got units of measure that are a little more convenient to work with. This is 10 points. So if I want something narrower, you know, I can just use my, you know, as long as this is highlighted or my cursor's in this offset path box, I can just use my arrow keys to bump that down and bump that up and see what I want. Yeah?
I'm not seeing that option in my properties menu.
So the measurements you're not seeing?
No, yeah.
So make sure you have nothing selected on your artboard.
Okay.
Deselect everything.
Okay.
You got it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one trick to that, is you got to make sure you got everything deselected so that it actually works on a document. The properties panel changes based upon what you're using and what you have selected. So if nothing's selected, then it's working in the document mode. So, but anyway, we can kind of increase that or decrease that. We can go negative numbers to inset a path. But it's a far simpler thing to do with, you know, working in points or pixels or something to that effect than it is working in inches. Unless you've got a real super big document you're working on, I think it's worth taking the time to switch to that. So I'm just going to use my arrow key, bump this back up. I'm going to go up to about 11, now we'll go to 12 points, and say OK. And this isn't it's a path function, so it's actually creating a new path for us. If I go back to my outline or my preview mode, it all looks the same, but I could select the center one now, switch it to white or blue or any other color that I want. but I've made a very even expansion of that path. So, I use this a lot. A lot of times when I illustrate different illustrations that I do, I'll like bound them by a real heavy dark line. It's like just kind of the style I tend to default to. I'll do line art illustration, but I'll give it a heavier outline. And this is a really simple way of doing that. So, but that's offset path, and it's worth remembering, getting to know. So that's object path and offset path. So here's an example of when I had to use it recently, as in recently, like yesterday. Let's see, Command Y. I'm gonna grab an artboard here, create another one, and I need to place an image. There is an image in here somewhere. Let's go to column view so I can see what I got. There we are. Place that image, grab a layer, make it a template. So here's one of those examples. I had a piece of line art I needed to do. So I can start this entire shape off, and I'm not going to center anything up here. I probably should, but I'm not gonna. So I can draw. I'm going to pick this first outer measurement. Let's go to outline mode. Pull all this in. And then around my corners. So, all right, there's my shape. And now I just select my shape, object, path, offset path, and I'll just bump this up until it pretty much matches that flange. So it gives it a nice even flange all the way around. So 22 I think works. And selecting this original one again, I want to do the inset that we've got as well. So selecting that, object, path, offset path. This will be a negative number because I want to go inside of it. So there. Say OK. Command Y. And then I know that I've got these shapes in here, so this one I'm just going to make for right now for construction purposes. Something kind of gray. This one I'm going to select both of these though and make that a compound path so that I get that outline. Actually, I don't like having the gray in there, so let's undo that. I'm going to copy this outer one. So I've got it. Copy that, select that. Command 8 will make my compound path. And then I'm just going to paste in the front that original one because I copied it to my clipboard. And I want to select the back one and do a Command 8 there again. So now I'm starting to build gradually that window artwork. This is, and the artwork that I did actually, that I used this for, let's see, was this piece of art here. So, you know, a simple kind of a thing, a very simple function, but it gives me all the pieces parts. Really, this is just a matter of, you know, duplicating shapes, and then I kind of did the same thing with the inner window, but, you know, that's how I keep things very organized, neat, and whatnot. It's far better looking than if I tried to draw each one of those individually and round those corners over, because it's accurate and you can kind of see it. So, but, you know, that offset path is just kind of a simple, simple kind of thing. So if I'm going to carry on with this a little bit further using that, I actually went and compound pathed all my shapes already, which I probably really didn't want to do. But what's kind of nice is that even though I create a compound path already, just like a group, I can select that object, double click on it, and I enter isolation mode. And I'm just going to select the inner shape is all I want. Copy it, back out here, and then I'm going to, actually, this is going to be, I'm going to name this layer outer frame and lock it down. Create a new frame, paste that in there. Now I'm going to look at doing this lower window here. But, you know, by way of the way I did this, I had those, you know, I created the shapes for the outer flange area, and I don't want to, those are right, and I don't want to select those anymore. I put them on their own layer and I lock the layer down, so I don't have to worry about it. This window now is what I'm going to build, and that's what's going to be here on this layer 3. I should probably name that. So now I've got, here, let's just hide the outer frame for now. Got that. So with this shape, I will offset that path. Maybe about like that. And take those, and I'm going to compound path those. Part of this is going on faith. You can't really see the change a lot of times when I do this, but once I got those two paths selected, compound 8 will make them a compound path. If I go back to outline mode or preview mode, I can see that. And then I'm just going to draw this bar that goes along here. Copy it just to hold on to. I probably did that out of order, but that's all right. I'm going to copy this because I want to change the shape of it. You know, I mean, I'm kind of just trying to break stuff down in a very simple way to build them. So like, I only need the lower half of this frame that I just built. I don't need the upper half at the moment. So looking at it, I'm drawing a box on top of it, and I'm going to subtract the front. So I have just that lower part. And then I can go ahead and come back in here. I probably cut that too low, but that's okay. Create a shape like that. Select them both, and I can unite those. So, and I just kind of, with that offset path command, gradually build the concentric shapes that I need. So and part of the reason I do this several times rather than just showing it to you and moving on is that there are a few exercise or a few projects we're going to do where this particular feature will come in quite handy. It's one of them's our iPhone. If you think about an iPhone and you look or any smartphone, you take a look at it, a bunch of concentric shapes, right? So it's an easy way to make sure that those are all nice and neat, because by the time we get there, I'm looking for really good, clean stuff, you know? So that's the offset path. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, and just generally build shapes with it. I'm not going to build this whole thing, but it struck me yesterday when I was working on this that when I was doing this that it, you know, is exactly what we're talking about here. So just as a little side, I'll take a slight detour. With this piece, you know, I mean, all of my layers I'm very clear on all my layers naming, because if I turn off closed, I created from the one layer, I can open this window up and show all of its opening points. That was actually kind of the point of the illustration, was that I needed to show the various opening points all the way up. So, you know, I created it once, but then I just slide it up and I, you know, tweak the little notch area. So, like I said, little detour, but just to show, you know, naming your layers is really rather important. All right. So that's our offset path, which is a nifty tool. You know, you get similar, I mean, you get the same results that, you know, I guess if I were to draw a rectangle around the corners over here, and then I'm going to go to my, let's flop and give it a black stroke. I could do the same kind of thing by creating a stroke and just, you know, but we're never leaving our, we're never leaving our strokes. But I guess I could do the exact same thing by creating a stroke and then going to Object, Path, Outline, Stroke, which we did the other day. And that would give me well, that's bizarre. Hang on. Well, that's going to outline mode, but that is not, for whatever reason. Sometimes Illustrator can be a little finicky. There's really no reason for that. But anyway, I could do the same sort of thing with a stroke. And sometimes that's the easiest thing to do, you know. But multiple ways to get the same result. I do like the offset path though, because like I said, a lot of times I'll put a heavier border around an illustration. Once I'm done with the illustration, I can sort of unite all my layers in a duplicate and then do the offset from that, and that gives me that nice, neat outline. So, anyway. So, we did that. What else we got? Reverse path direction. I'll show you this. I don't know. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I'll show it to you. Part of the reason I'm a little hesitant on it is this. One of those things, every path has a direction. So where you lay down your first point is the beginning, and as you lay down additional points, especially the pen tool, that's the direction that the path actually goes. And you can get different effects by reversing the direction of the path, basically swapping the first point to the last point, and everything else falls in line. Not I don't know. I don't come up with a whole lot of reasons to consciously make that choice, but it does, I mean, I guess knowing about it kind of makes sense. So I drew a path here, and I'm gonna use my width tool to actually widen out one end of it, just so I can see if I'm gonna get a difference. That's a strand of hair or whatever the heck it is. If I go and switch, go to my object menu, path, and I reverse the path direction, that's gonna flip the way that effect is applied. Because I widened the very first point, so since I flipped it, so I suppose there are times when that might be useful. Maybe I really needed a shape that kind of, a duplicate shape. So maybe that's a good reason to do it, something along those lines. But we can also, let's see, if I remember right, I'll draw a circle and then draw a new circle. And 8. If I select this path, object, if I reverse with compound shapes like a circle, it happens on occasion that you'll have paths that go different directions and they won't really compound path quite correctly. It doesn't happen very often. One of those things that's easier to point out if it happens to you, but it's still a compound path, but I reversed. They were both going the same direction, and I reversed one of them, and it's still a compound path, but it fills in the whole thing. So it happens occasionally, not super often, but just in the interest of kind of being complete, I guess. All right, so I got that. Let's go down here to path and simplify, smooth, add anchor. Okay, so we're going to take a look at join and average, which is another one that actually on the alarm clock may be somewhat handy. So I'm going to draw just I'm going to pull out a guide so I know where I'm dropping my first point at. So I'm going to pull out a guide here and use my pen tool, and I'm just going to create a shape. And it's, then select my direct select. I'm going to refine it just a little bit, this little arc. Yeah, that's good. Do that, and I'll thicken it up just a hair. All right. So what join does is it'll actually join overlapping paths together. So I want to make a shape. I'm going to actually take this. This is a half of, actually, to be entirely honest, it's half of an alarm clock handle. So if I select this path, and I'm going to go up here to my rotate tool, and I'm going to find the reflect tool. And the reason I did this was that I'm going to place my cursor right over top of this endpoint, or over top of the guide and the point that's sitting on it. Hold down my option key and click right there, and it'll duplicate it. And if I make a copy, it'll give me that. Except that if I grab this and move it, they're two separate shapes, and I want them to be one shape. So if I select I'm going to grab the direct select tool, drag it around both of those points right there that are on the guide, so I select them both. If I go to my object menu, path, join, or Command J on the keyboard makes it even faster. After I do that, I now have one shape left. The difference between join and average is this. I'm going to undo, let's see, I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to undo it. Command Z, Command Z. Paste, and we'll just drag that one down there. All right, so now I'm back to having two halves, all right? If I pull these apart, this should join them, but let's do it. Yeah, so that'll join them. It just gives a little flat spot. But if I use average, select those both and use average instead, I get some options. And it wants to know how I want to join these on the horizontal, on either the horizontal axis, the vertical axis, or do both. I just leave both checked. Very seldom do I ever need to change this. But what it'll actually do is, if I say okay, see the difference between what I did the first time? When I joined, it simply bridged those 2 points. But the average that I just applied actually takes the position of those 2 points. Let me do that again. I want to duplicate both of these. All right. So if I select these 2 points, object, path, join, it simply bridges them. But if I use the average, what it'll do is it'll identify where both these points are, find the halfway point, create a new point there, and join them at that position. So, average, do it on both axes, say okay. It makes a much cleaner curve than just joining did. So join by itself works okay if you know the points are on top of each other. If you've done this flip, if you reflected like I did, but you're not 100% sure that you actually were right on that grid, run the average. Do the average one instead of join. They're so close that even if they're overlapping to opposite sides of the axis or the guide, it'll still put them in the right spot. So, but that's join and average. That's a far better, more accurate way to build a handle of something, for instance, than trying to do it this way. It's also a little quick, may not be quicker, probably a little bit longer, but it's certainly more accurate. It's much more symmetrical. And, Illustrator gives us oodles of ways to be really sort of precise and symmetrical, so, which makes sense, but. You want to look at any of those again, or did you follow along okay? Yeah. The average is here under the object menu, under path. It's the second one, right beneath join.
You're using a pencil to make that, right?
Say it again.
You're using a pencil?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I made these with a pen tool. I mean, I could have done it any number of ways probably, but. So once I'm done creating the shape that I've got, again, I don't want to leave strokes on things, so I'll just go back to my path menu and outline that stroke so it's a shape. So these are all stroked paths. This one's now a shape. nice and even and consistent. All right, let's see. So our object panel. That's the majority that we really kind of need to cover there. I mean, for everything you generally do. Simplify and smooth, we looked at with the smooth tool last time. Remember that we looked at the smooth tool with the pencil? The menu options, the equivalent menu options for those are here under path, and it's simplify and smooth. So if you've got a really complex path, try simplify. See if you can get rid of some points. One other thing with all of this, and then we'll move on to type. Look at the type tools. So if I've got, and I use this all the time, but I use it mostly in After Effects. But all the Adobe apps do this. So I create another artboard there. I want to create a square. If I create a shape and I know I need to double it, or if I want to create if I know I want to double the size of the shape, create a duplicate of it at twice the size, or I want to make a composition in After Effects or in Illustrator for a 1920 by 1080 video, but I want to make it twice the size it is going to be used at. Every single dialogue, whether it's a rectangle or an ellipse-shaped dialogue or anything else, you can actually type equations into. So if I've got this shape right here, and I don't know how big it is exactly, but what I do know is I need a shape that's twice this size. So here's how big it is. I may as well make it 85. If I want to double the size of that, I can type into the transform box on my properties panel, 85 times, which is an asterisk, 2, and it'll do the math for me and do the increase. But you can do that in every dialogue. I mean, if you needed if I want to make that, it's 12 points now. If I want to make it 24, I would probably just make it 24. But I can multiply by 2 and get a 24-point stroke. Same thing goes for pretty much anything else. I mean, you can even, if I want 24 points, plus 8, well, now I get a 32-point stroke. So you can type, you can type equations into all these boxes. Just a little side note. Sometimes it's useful. A lot of times it's not. But I'll use it in video a lot just because whenever I create assets for animations, I'll usually want to, I know that it's going to be a 1920 by 1080 or a 1080 square video, but I'll want to make my assets twice that size. So rather than pull out a calculator and do it, I'll just go into the composition window and type out the equation and it does it for me. So it's the equivalent of using it as a calculator, I guess. All right. Anything on things I went over with paths that you want to see again or had a question about before I move on to type? All right. So I'm going to